Good morning and welcome to Farnham Angling Society's Stillwater Complex. We've got two lakes here, very similar in stocks, predominantly carp venues, but there's a lot of big bream in here to double figures. And this video today is really just to give the club angler the basics required to turn up at such a venue, cast out and catch big bream in the daytime as well. I'm going to go through some rigs. I'm not going to get too complicated. A bit of mixing the bait, a bit of watercraft, the tackle you need just to get you on your way. And then after this video, maybe later in the month, what I'm going to do is do another video called the percentage gain and just go into those finer details to add more fish, increase your catch rate, just, you know, get you catching more fish, because sometimes it is the finer details that make all the difference. So today we'll just keep it nice and simple. We'll catch a few fish and hopefully you'll get enough little tips just to get out and start bagging up, because we're not even into April yet. It's quite cold, but I've got a nice southwesterly and I'm hopeful of a few fish to show you. Right, the first thing you do when you get to the lake is to get your ground bait mixed up, or at least get it going. All I do is just add some water, give it a good mix. Today I'm using the big fish, marine halibut, good fish meal ground bait. Bream love that, but it doesn't really matter. You can use, the other week I was using the big river, which is quite heavy. And I tend to actually mix my ground bait up dry when I'm fishing a ground bait feeder. So again, just a little bit of lake water, give it a good mix, turn it over, and then once you can actually kind of like just ball it and it stays there, that's good. You can then get on, carry on, get your tackle set up, your ground bait, all the particles are taking in that moisture, and then when you come back you'll find it's dried out and you'll just have to add a little bit more water. Now I do add a little bit of robin red oil to it because all fish love robin red. Hook bait today is going to be my favourite when I'm bream fishing this early in the year. The sun is just coming up and we're not even into April yet, so it's really early in the season. I'm not going to get pestered by small fish, so it's going to be good red maggots. 3 on a size 16, fished on a helicopter rig, and we're going to hopefully catch lots of bream. Now, in these days when the cost of living is going up and up and we're all having to save a few pennies, then a little tip for you when bream fishing, or when you just go tench fishing or anything using ground bait and maggots, is it doesn't matter how little there is left over at the end of the day. Instead of putting it in, which most clubs don't want you to do anyway, it's just to take it home, put it in a bag, a freezer bag, stick it in the freezer, freeze it down. Those live maggots become dead maggots. Bream love dead maggots, so it gives you an option when you go fishing to your live maggots as well. And when you come down to the lake, you don't even have to get and do any ground bait. If you've got enough ground bait in an ice cream container or bag like this, it's all nice, it's moist, it goes in the ground bait really well. You can get fishing straight away whilst your other ground bait is being prepared. So, as I said, the sun is just coming up. We've got a nice southwesterly today. I've got the wind pushing into this bank and I'm hopefully going to catch a lot of bream. Let's get fishing. Right, my ground bait's nicely mixed up now. As you can see, it holds together well, but I can just run it in the palms of my hand and it just falls apart. That is actually perfect. You might have to dampen it down later in the day, but in general, that's good to go. It's got a few dead maggots in from the ground bait that I froze and added. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to fill this feeder up, cast out to sort of about 50-55 yards. Bream like to be away from the bank, so in general you're going to have to be fishing at a distance of probably 40 to 80 yards. I'll go through the rods that I use for this a bit later on, but for now let's get some ground bait out and let's see if I can get their heads down. Just cast it out, let it sink, pick a mark on the far bank. I've got a nice bush there that's just coming up with all the pussy willow, and just give it 10-15 seconds, strike it off. You probably saw I'm clipped up, so I'm just hitting the clip, so I'm being nice and accurate, although you don't have to be bang on the money or the dinner plate, as they say with bream. You can spread it about a bit, but I do like to think that I'm fishing as best I can. So just keep repeating the process. I'm going to do this about a dozen times, and that should get the bream going. Well, I've made about a dozen casts. I haven't got a hook link on. I don't want to damage a hook link. I just get the feeder on. I've got another rod all clipped up, ready to go. So when I'm making the hook link up for this one, I can get a rod in the water, one more, out towards the bush on the far bank. As I say, I'm clipped up. I want to be accurate, but you don't have to be bang on the money. And just hit the clip, give it 10 seconds, 15 seconds, and then, because it's quite dry, you can just strike it off. Now I can prepare a few other things and get fishing. Okay, time to make my first cast. I'm using a size 16 barbless hook. Barbless hook isn't ideal when you're fishing the heady rig and maggot, as you can appreciate. Normally I use 2 maggots. On a barbless hook I'll use 3, because if one comes off, I've still got 2, which looks nice and balanced. But if I use 2 and 1 comes off, and I've only got, you know, a single maggot on a 16, it doesn't look that brilliant. So fill my ground bait up, my feeder with my ground bait. This is a 50-gram Browning Xenos feeder. I'm going to make the first cast and see what happens. As you can see, I'm standing just behind my bank sticks. There's a reason for that, because I'm clipped up. So, make my first cast. Hit the clip, line straight and straight out. Sink the line, just close the bail line. As you can see, I'm not unclipping. Now you might think that's quite strange, but in this lake I've only ever caught bream doing this. I've never hooked a carp or a tench or anything. So what I do is I just sink the line, take a couple of steps forward, put the rod down. As you can see, I've got my rods at an angle. I'll explain that later. Put the alarms on. There's a few turns there. The bites off a bream are normally beep beep, and then it just drops back. So as I say, this isn't what I would normally do if I was fishing, let's say, a lake called like Badshot Lee, where I do a lot of bream fishing, because quite often you'll look a 20-pound carp, or you know, a 6 or 7 pound tench, and they can rip off, and if you've got it clipped up, you risk losing your rod or your hook link's going to go. So on this lake I just clip up, stand back, take a few steps forward, get a couple of turns on, because I'm pretty confident all I'm ever going to catch here is bream doing this. So I've got the rods at an angle so I can see those bites on the tip. Let's get the other rod sorted. Well, there you go. I've only just got that second rod in the water and we're into our first fish. And it's exactly what we came for, a bream. They don't feel very big at first, but in this lake they seem to average sort of 7 pound. Lovely way of fishing, sitting by your rods and watching the quiver tips. So easy to to fish on alarms. I've got both on just to show you that you don't need alarms really. You can just watch the tips, swing round and see what's happening out in your swim. So I say that rod was out probably, well, I haven't even got my oval up because I think we're going to have a bit of rain. About 10 minutes. Just take it easy. They're not known for their fighting qualities, but this earlier in the year when the tench are only just waking up, you can come down. And Farnham Angling Club have got lots of lakes that have got big bream in. So I'm at Stillwater today fishing the back lake. The front lake have, I would say, is very similar stocks, and chance of a double in the front lake. Here they all seem to be peas in a pod, sort of 6.5 to 8.5 pound. In she goes. First one of the session. I'm expecting quite a few of these over the course of the day. I should just hold you up. As you can see, they're not small fish here. Cracking bream, probably about getting on for £7. It's going to be a good day. If your rigs are working perfectly, you'll see you'll hook them in the bottom lip as the bream goes down, picks the bait up, lifts its head, the weight of the feeder, the tight line to the rod tip, it just pulls that hook down into the bottom lip. So if you're not hooking them in the bottom lip, there's something not quite right. But there you can see, bottom lip, 2 maggots on there, one's come off. That's how you know your rig's working perfectly. Well, I'm into my second bream, but amazingly, after that first fish, which took in probably 10 minutes, I've had to wait best part of an hour to hook the next fish. I had one big drop back, probably a bream getting away with it a few minutes ago, but certainly not feeding like they were earlier in the week when you just could not keep your rods in the water. Just goes to show even bream that we think are predictable can be unpredictable. But it might just take a little bit longer today to get them in the swim and get their heads down. I know an angler fished here yesterday, I think it was this swim, and caught quite a few, so they might be getting a bit cheesed off with a lot of their mates out the shoal being hooked and caught. But I was actually contemplating on moving to the other lake, which is a big tip actually. Do not sit in a swim for too long. If you haven't had a bite in sort of 90 minutes, then I would say you're not on them. And I haven't got all day, I can only fish till the early afternoon. So sometimes you just have to make the call, move. I've done it before, and I nearly done it then, although I did have one early on. I mean, these are big fish, they're not small fish, they're proper slabs. In she goes. Happy days. Second one. Let's hope I'm going to get a few more. Another little tip to put more fish in your net is to keep your rigs in the water for as long as you possibly can. A few seconds, it only takes a second to get a bite. I've got the bream in the landing net. I'm getting this rod back out. Yeah, on the clip, line down, sink, do not move that feeder. Just tighten that line up bait runner on, just tighten up, bobbing on. So fish is in the net, we can get a photograph and deal with her now. Rod's back in that water. It might only be 3 or 4 minutes, but that could mean over the course of the day, if you're catching a few, 3 or 4 more fish in the net. So there we go, fish number 2. Okay, this is a small fish for here. 6 pound I would say, 6.5 pound. Female, getting ready for spawning, big belly on her. But that took a lot longer than it should have done. But some days that's fishing, we never know what one day will bring to the next. Perfect conditions, been fishing great all week. Today, it's just a bit slow. Well, that's bream number 3 again. It's been about half an hour since the last fish. I've just missed a couple of drop backs, just fish got away with it. So I think they're moving in, as you can see. If March is anything to go by, I've got a drop back now, so they've definitely moved in. If March is anything to go by with the showers, as you can see, I've got the wet weather gear on. God knows what April's going to be like. Let's get this one back because I've got another fish on that rod. So there you have it, fish number 4. Bigger bream, you can see she's pigeon chested, coming up to spawning. Cracking fish, quite a pale fish this one, but that's fish number 4. It's not fishing that well at the moment. Just picking the fish up now and again, but you know, that's fishing. You have good days, you have bad days, and sometimes you have impossible days, and this one's what you call a tough day. Let's just quickly run through the tackle you need to come down and target these bream on your club lake. You've probably got a rod that will make do. These are the Kevlar barbel fox rods. I've had them years, superb rods, quite expensive in their day. 1.5 top sections, and I've got a 4-ounce tip added. So you can just come down with a quiver tip rod, watch that quiver, 1 rod, or like I do, you've got the 2 rods set up, you know, specialist style, carp style, with the bobbins and the alarms. Reels, I've got little 4000s on here, Shimano's, loaded with 10 pound Browning Gold, 9.6 break and strain line. The great thing about that is it's quite, you know, quite a strong line, but it's low diameter, makes casting a little bit easier and reduces the chance of snapping off as well, which you don't want to do. And then coming down to the rig itself, I've got a 50 gram ground bait Browning feeder there, big hole so it releases quickly. That is tied on the end of the main line, and then I've got 2 float stops and a little swivel trap between them. A tiny little taper sleeve in there to create a boom, and then a hook link made of 514 Reflow, about the length of my finger, and down to a size 16 super specialist hook. And ideally that needs to be micro barbed. At the moment I'm having to use a barbless because of the club rules, but if you're allowed to use a micro barbed hook, please do. It's a self hooking rig. When the bream pick that up, lift up, you've just got that security, the hook goes in. But just as importantly, when you're banging out a feeder at 80 yards with 3 maggots on or 2 maggots on, the barb just makes sure that that presentation is perfect. So you don't have to spend a lot of money on the tackle. You've probably already got it there. Just come down, give it a go, and hopefully those bream will be crawling up your rods. And here we go again, another April shower in March. And I think this is my 7th fish. I was trying to go through the tackle you need when this one ripped off. I've got to admit, This rod's been producing most of the bites, and that's the reason I took the other one out. I'm going to change the hook link. Something that a lot of anglers do not do. They cast 2 rods out and they seem to get more fish on one rod. The other day I had all my fish on the right hand rod and I kept changing the hook link, casting, and I just could not get a bite. But the way I work things, if I'm getting all my bites on the left hand rod and nothing's on the other, then there's something seriously wrong with that rig. So you've got to get your second rod working for you. Hopefully when you go fishing both rods are working for you, but today it's my right hand, so the left hand has come in and I'm going to change that hook link. I think this is fish number, I don't know, 7 now. It's not been an easy day. Sometimes you just can't keep the rods in the water, but today they're just coming steadily now. It's taken a time for them to get their heads down, but I'm getting one every sort of 20 minutes or so. So cracking fishing. As I said, it's not even April yet. Big rain clouds in the air. It's not going to be long before we get another shower, which I must admit most people that are going out fishing at the moment are getting pretty sick of. And so these are lovely rods. They just take all those heavy lunges, but they still got the power to poke out a feeder at 80 yards if I need to fish at that distance. Feels like a better fish. And that's another proper slab coming in. Fighting a bit harder because it's a male. As you can see, all the marks and on its face and back shows it's a male coming up for spawning. So fish number 7, I think. When you lose count, you know you're having a good day. Probably about £6 that one of the smaller ones. Go on. And away. But I think this is fish number 8. Cracking bream. Probably about £8 that one. That's sort of, yeah, slightly bigger than the average size, but they do go to over £10. So I think that's 8 or 9, but when you're struggling to count, you're having a good day. Well, as you can see, the sun's out. I think the showers have passed. I'm into another fish. It has slowed up quite considerably, but every now and again the tip goes round and we're into a bream. And as you can see, I've not got the other rod out, and that is because there's one in the net and one on the rod. And when these bream come in, it's often the case, you just cannot keep the rods in the water. But I think I'm going to call this one my last one. It's been a tough day, but I've had 10, 11, maybe a dozen bream on what I would classify as a tough day. So it is meant to rain really hard later today, so I don't want to get soaked again. Every time I seem to go out, I'm getting wet. So as you can see, the fishing, it isn't that difficult. A feeder rod or a 125/15 test curve rod. The helicopter rig is absolutely superb at this time of year. Maggot's good. You can use little boilies. Just clip it up, keep it cast in on the same spot. It took a long time for the fish to come in this morning after that very quick fish, but you just have to have confidence in what you're doing, patience sometimes, and eventually they should turn up. And there she goes. So I've got a him and a her in the net. which I'll show you in a minute. But I just want to talk about something really important, and that is casting. Probably the one thing that I see most that lets an angler down is not really being able to cast, or cast accurately, and not paying attention to keeping it going in the same spot, clipping up, marking your line with a bit of elastic, etc, etc. But I've just wound this rod in, and as you can see, my maggots have been absolutely chewed to bits. Now, if I was to cast that out, let's say that happened in 10 minutes, 15 minutes, but I didn't wind my rod in for an hour, that is like you going into a restaurant, ordering a nice fillet steak, and the chef giving it a good chew. When it comes out to you, it's not going to be very appetizing, you won't eat it. Same for bream. So if you're casting quite regularly, get into a routine, if you wind that in and they're knackered, you haven't wasted too much time. Get it back out, and quite often bites come very, very soon after a recast. And if you think I'm not very good at casting, there's only one way to get better, and that is get down your lake and just practice. Bream, you don't have to be on the dinner table, as they say. You can be, you know, you just don't, accuracy plays a part, but not in the same sense as fishing for crusions or tench. So you will catch, you know, bream just casting around. And as I say, practice, practice, practice. Get out there, do it, catch a few fish. There will be another video coming where I'll show you a few little top tips, a little bit of just increasing those percentage to not just go down and catch 2 or 3 or 4 on a red letter day, but to put, you know, like I've done today, 10, maybe a dozen fish on a difficult day, and on one of those red letter days like we had earlier in the week, when you're catching, you're just losing count and you're catching a couple of dozen in 3 or 4 hours. So just like golfers go to the golf range and they just practice hitting a ball, to be perfectly honest, you can either hit a ball or you can't, and sometimes practicing on a driving range doesn't improve you. But believe me, when it comes to casting, it's just getting that technique right, that timing right, and it will certainly catch you so many more fish. So there we have it, 2 rods out of the water, 2 bream in the net. The female, as you can see, there's no, I think they're called tubercles or something. You can see on this male, really rough on the head. That's what you can tell the male is. And then you've got the female here, a little bit paler, normally got a bit of a belly. 2 cracking bream just to finish the day off. Get down your local club lake, even join Farnham Angling Club, because they've got lots and lots of venues where you can go and do this. Badshot Ton when it's open. You've got Mill Lane that's got a few really big bream in it. So, and of course down here, still water, early in the season, best time. Get down here, get the helicopter rigs out, maggot hook bait, and enjoy it.